Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Kelly Wayment and happy to have you here. Today we are in this class going to kind of dig in pretty deep to blades and the different blades that will work with the Cameo 5 Alpha. And I should mention that all of these blades I'm talking about will also actually work in the Cameo 5 and the Cameo 4. But today I'm just focusing on the Cameo 5 Alpha. We've got several blades I'm going to talk about. So let me grab these. So Autoblade, this is the blade that comes with every machine. This is kind of your all-purpose, cuts everything standard. And so that is, you should all have one of these blades. The other blade I'm going to talk about is the manual 1mm blade. That has got a light purple cap to it. Next is the 2mm Autoblade. That has got a dark purple cap to it. Or did I say manual blade? 2mm manual blade. And then we've got the 2mm Kraft Blade. That has got an orange top. Looks almost the same as the 3mm Kraft Blade, but also has an orange top. But the difference is one of them, the dial goes up to 20, and the other one, the dial goes up to 30. And then I'll just briefly touch on the rotary blade. If you have questions along the way, go ahead and ask in the chat. I've got a couple of assistants, one to call out any questions that come out in the chat, questions or comments. And then I've got another assistant that's going to be kind of showing you when we do the software screencast, is going to be kind of showing you that part of it. So let's go ahead, and we don't really have any tools and materials we're working with. It's not necessarily a project. I will be showing you some things that we're doing with the different blades, but this is kind of software and tool based, not quite so much project based. I am using the Cameo 5 Alpha, as I mentioned. Most of these blades, you're going to want a good sticky mat. So when we get to like the Kraft Blade, you can just use the standard cutting mat. There's also the high-tack cutting mat that's kind of got a darker gray outline, but most of the time I'm just using the standard cutting mat, and that does great. And if I need it sticky, then I just get out a new mat, and that is sticky enough. Another thing that you'll see me use is the roll feeder, and this is the new roll feeder that was released recently, and this has a different top that's closest to the machine. I really like the change in the side guides. You'll see when I use it that I like to use this left side for kind of a guide for loading my mat. I can just really just bump it right up against that guard there. And it's just easy to get my mat loaded the same place every time. I'm not going to use it as a roll feeder. I leave it completely closed, and what that does is it keeps my mat flatter as I'm working with unusual materials. So sometimes a material that's a little bit stiffer, like if you're using one of the Kraft blades, you're going to be using that generally for something that's thicker or firmer. And if I can keep my mat flat, there's less chance of that kind of popping off, especially if your mat isn't sticky enough. So you don't have to use the roll feeder, but I just like it as an extra little platform. So you'll see me use that. Okay, so I'm going to go over some tips and tricks, and I'll probably cover these again as we come to the specific blades that they pertain to. But you want to make sure that you are choosing the blade that is specifically for your machine. So the Cameo 5 Alpha, these all have this blade that has the flat back on it and the tool, oh, let's see, I can't think of the tool, the one that recognizes auto detect. Yeah, auto detect. So these all have a little bar on the back that tells the machine, when it's inserted, it tells the machine which tool you've got. So make sure that you are always using the correct tool. This one will not fit in like the Cameo 3. Cameo 3 tools are completely round. So 4, 5, and 5 alpha have that flat back on it. And then of course you're going to choose the tool that's right for the material cutting, and we'll cover that. Use the recommended blade depth and force settings for your materials as a starting base, and then you'll do a test cut and adjust from there. So the Silhouette Studio software already has all of the standard materials that Silhouette sells, so like all the different types of sticker paper and vinyl and other specialty media, and then of course it's got like cardstock and thin cardstock and copy paper, vinyl, all of those things. So start with the recommended settings, do a test cut, and then you're going to move on from there depending on the success of your test cut. One of the suggestions, especially if you're working with something fibrous like felt or even craft foam, is to make sure that you're removing debris from your blade after every cut. I will usually check if it's something that I think probably has maybe spit some stuff up into my blades, then I will check it and clean it after before I send the next job. As far as replacing a blade, the time to replace a blade is when you've been using the same cut settings for a certain material and those same cut settings no longer work well enough. So there's a little bit of adjustment. You can increase the force setting by, I don't know, 2 or 3 points, and then you can increase the blade depth if you need to, but there will come a point where you're just not getting good cuts anymore, and that's time to replace the blade. So you can extend the blade's life just a little bit longer with, you know, even adding a second pass, but there will come a point where it's just better to get a new blade installed there. Besides replacing your blade, you would be surprised how well changing your mat to a stickier brand new mat also improves your cut. So besides changing your blade, you also want to keep in mind that if you get out a fresh sticky cutting mat, that's also going to improve your blade performance. Both a worn out blade and a worn out mat, you'll get a little deterioration in how well your blade cuts. If you are looking at blades and they say something like type A or type B, type C, type B is generally the one that you're going to look for the Cameo 5 Alpha. That is just that it's in the newer machines. So type B is that one with the flat back and the auto detect little bar on the back. And so type B is going to be your Autoblade, your manual blade 1 and 2 millimeters, your Kraft Blade 2 millimeter, and then you've got a couple that'll say type C. That means it goes in the new machine, but it goes in carriage 2. So these 4 go in carriage 1, these 2 go in carriage 2, and it's got the number on the actual tool, so you know which tool carriage it's going to go into, the left side or the right side, and those are also marked with a 1 or a 2. All right, I think the other tips we'll go over as we try out the different blades. There is a tool compatibility chart. I'm not able to show you on my software, but it is silhouetteamerica.com and then /tool-compatibility. So that will bring up a tool compatibility chart. And there are some of the tools, I know I found it just on the Silhouette website, where it suggests going to this tool compatibility chart. As you are looking at that, it'll tell you which machine goes with which blade, or which blade goes with which machine. So that's a somewhat helpful resource. It's a little bit large, so you have to watch for little scroll bars along the top, so you can drag your little scroll bar to see the full, all of the columns and all of the rows for your tool, just to see all those tools. So that's silhouetteamerica.com /tool-compatibility. All right, so let's talk about the Autoblade. So this is, as I mentioned, this is your standard blade that comes with the Cameo 4, 5, 5 Alpha, and the Portrait 3 and newer. So Portrait 3 and Portrait 4. This has the flat top, it's got the sensor bar on the back, and it's got your, it goes in carriage 1, and you've got 1 through 10. So this is going to cut things, it's going to adjust automatically. So in your send panel, you've got your options for choosing what material you're going to use, and then make sure your blade is installed when you're choosing a material, so it knows that you have the Autoblade installed, and it'll give you your options. So whether it's heat transfer, you've got a whole bunch of different types of heat transfer. You've got various vinyl settings, paper. So the blade itself, you're going to choose the material, and the blade will adjust before it starts cutting. So I actually love this blade. This takes so much thought out of what I'm doing. I just pick my material, and I don't have to remember to go and adjust it manually. So it's really convenient. If you do need to adjust it yourself, or if you're trying to make sure that it's actually working and adjusting, you can just push your finger against the bottom, and if you press hard, it'll reset it to 0. And then if you just press lightly, don't push on the blade itself, just push on the edge of the cap, that will actually adjust those one at a time, and you can see that little red bar moving across, so you know what blade setting it's on. And so if you're checking to see if your Autoblade is actually working, or if for some reason you wanted to manually adjust it, you can do that just with your, your fingernail. Don't ever touch the blade itself, but you can touch the cap. Yep, paper, cardstock, vinyl, heat transfer, sticker paper, and pretty much all specialty media that the Silhouette shop sells. So on silhouetteamerica.com, unless it tells you otherwise, if it sells it, the Autoblade should be able to cut it. If it's a cuttable material. I should say that there's some things on there like foil, or let's see, engraving things for like the Curio 2 that are not meant to be cut at all. Another good rule of thumb is if you can cut something easily with an X-Acto knife, it's going to cut easily with your Autoblade. So why would you choose this blade? It's all-purpose, and you don't have to remember to adjust the blade. This does go in tool holder 1. So that is your left side. So you're going to make sure that you push it all the way down, the blade all the way down, and then press your lever in to lock it in place. If you don't lock it, that blade will just move as it goes. So just as an example, we're just going to cut a piece of cardstock. Now the Cameo 5 Alpha does use the electrostatic mat, but today I'm just using the sticky mat just for simplicity, because some of these materials will only do, they won't use the electrostatic mat at all. So I'm just going to use the same mat on all of them. Make sure you've adjusted your rollers. Since I'm using a mat, I've got this extended out to the farthest position on the right. All right, so Autoblade. I am just going to use a cardstock setting. What I will do often on some of these is I'll also choose pattern paper, but I will tell you my blade settings, I'm usually using a force of anywhere between 30 to 33, and my speed, 5 is a good speed. If you're cutting a lot of things and you know that your settings are good, you can usually speed that up a little bit, up to maybe 10. And then my blade depth is 3. Most of the cardstock I'm cutting with a blade depth of 3. And then just a single pass. And yeah, that's about it. So I'm going to go ahead and send that. So your blade depth is kind of your big change, your big increments. Each blade difference, so like from a 1 to a 2, a 2 to a 3, that's a 0.1 millimeter difference. So if you're at a blade 1, you're at 0.1. If you're at a 10, you are 1 millimeter. And so if you're making big changes, that is your blade depth. If you are just really close, but you're just trying to change it just a little bit, then that's when you're going to change your force. So like I said, I usually cut my regular cardstock between 30 and 33, and I will just go kind of by, I'm used to a lot of paper, so a lot of times I'll just go by feel. You should go by test cut until you get used to how that feels, what good settings you've got. But yeah, I think this is cutting on a force of 32. And if you have questions about like the difference between force and speed and blade depth, let me know. I'm kind of trying to describe that as we go. Speed, I would say the easier it is to cut, the faster you can cut it. If it's a more delicate, intricate design, or if your material is thicker, I will slow down the speed. And some things just need a slower speed just to make sure that it's not going to go crazy and yeah, cut too fast for you to catch any mistakes. If you do have bad settings and you start to get little hang-ups, if it makes grinding or popping noises, just quickly press your power button on the side. That's an emergency stop, and that will just stop everything really quickly. If you press pause, that will stop it, but it's still sending information. It's still carrying out the information that was sent before it will actually pause. So your faster one is the emergency stop on the side. And when we're done here, it's going to have this pretty butterfly. This is a double-sided pattern paper, so it's got whatever side you choose. It's going to have that butterfly. So this is just an example of something the Autoblade will cut. Pattern paper, solid color cardstock, sticker paper. That's another really popular one. All those are for the Autoblade. So let's see. All right, I probably should have done a test cut because that didn't completely cut through. I could send it again right now since I can tell that didn't cut all the way through, but I'm not going to worry about it. If it were you, before you unload it, just send it one more time. It did cut some of it. But like I said, this is what it would cut. Is that butterfly. Now, let's move on to the 1mm manual blade. So basically, these two blades are interchangeable. Your light purple and your Autoblade, they both go between 0 and 10. If you look at the little dial, they will cut up to 1mm. And then they cut all the same materials. Paper of all types, vinyl, heat transfer vinyl, sticker paper, your normal specialty materials that are in the Silhouette store. The difference is on the manual blade, you are adjusting the settings. So you are dialing yourself, you're twisting that dial, you're looking at what the send panel tells you for the material you've chosen. So if it says paper or cardstock, we'll just go with cardstock again, it'll tell you a blade depth of 3. And so you are going to set it on 3 and then stick it into your machine to cut. The reason you might choose this one over the Autoblade is some people don't trust the Autoblade, but I've been using the Autoblade for many years at this point, and I love the Autoblade. So you might want to just have all the control. I have seen people that want to do like a 2.5 as their blade gets more dull. If they start on a 2 and blade gets a little dull, they'll go to like a 2.5. I don't do that. I use those small changes in the software where I'm doing like the adjustment in force. I'll just make it a little more force. When I do use it is if I'm cutting exactly the same material over and over and over. If I know it's just going to be on a 3 and I'm just cutting over and over and over, then it doesn't have to do any adjustment with the Autoblade. Like the Autoblade, you don't have to wait for any tapping. It'll just go. It's already set. One thing that actually has been improved recently is the Autoblade does less tapping. It remembers your most recent. So if you're in the current version of Silhouette Studio version 5, I think it's 5.0.414 at this moment, your blade will remember if you did your last job on a 2 and you haven't taken out the blade, you haven't turned off your machine, and you're sending the same material again, it's not actually going to adjust. It will remember that you did a 2. So that's actually a little feature that makes the Autoblade, again, closer to the manual blade because it takes out that adjustment for that circumstance where you're cutting the same thing. Okay. This is, I was going to cut some vinyl, but I want to make sure I have enough time to talk about the other blades. So if you're cutting something like vinyl, it may tell you to do it on a 1 a blade 1. With my test cuts, I usually cut a vinyl on blade depth of 2 and force of 8 to 10, and sometimes heavier depending on the age of the vinyl. Some vinyls thicker, but just make sure you're doing a test cut. And this is something I cut yesterday with the vinyl, with the manual blade. I'm not going to spend the time because it looks exactly the same as the Autoblade. It just doesn't do it, and the little fins that are different between the blade 1 and blade 2, so they won't go in the wrong tool holder. So you can see this one's got 2 little fins that are close together, and this one has 2 little fins that are farther apart. So they might look the same from the top, but they have enough difference that they won't go in the wrong tool carriage. Okay, the manual blade 2mm looks a lot. It's dark purple instead of light purple. The difference is you've got your dial will go 0 to 20 instead of 0 to 10. This blade will still cut all those same things as this one because it has that 0 to 10 that you can choose. So if you were just going to get one blade, if they were the same price, and I don't know if they are, you might just want to get if you wanted a manual blade, you could get the dark purple one, because then you can cut your paper, your vinyl, your heat transfer. You're just staying at those lower settings. But if you do want to cut something thicker, maybe Kraft foam, this will go all the way up to 20, which equates to 2mm thick. So let's look at that real quick for Kraft foam. One other thing is your blade on all 3 of these are exactly the same blade. They're a sharp, narrow, pointy blade. And when we look at the Kraft blade, those are going to look a little bit different. So let me dial that. I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but you can see it's a tiny pointed blade, which is the same thing that's in the 1mm manual blade and in the Autoblade. So if I want to cut Kraft foam with the manual 2mm blade, if you've been around a while, you might know that this used to be called the deep cut blade. They got rid of that name a while ago. They just call it the manual 2mm blade, but it used to be the deep cut blade. Just goes 0 to 20 with that same sharp, pointy blade. Okay, let me I am just going to cut out a heart, I think. All right, so if I'm going in my send panel, and this is also a carriage 1. And if I want to set it to Kraft foam, so the manual blades are a little tricky because you have to have it inserted for that material to show up to tell you what blade depth to set it to. This one's actually telling me a 9, but that's assuming probably a 1mm Kraft foam, and I've got a 2mm Kraft foam, so I would set up a custom cut setting. So, Michael, do you want to go over with, we'll just set up a custom cut setting. Okay, so when you are in the send panel, and if it tells you that either you don't have the right setting for that material, or if you just know you need to set up your own, I would click More. There's a little blue More button. The other thing you could do is just use the drop down button. Let's see. That will say you can add a new material. So when you are in material settings, you should have an option to say with a little plus at the bottom of your list for materials. So click a little plus, and it's going to kind of highlight new material, and you can just say like, I don't know, Kraft foam or 5 alpha Kraft foam. And then once you hit enter, you need to choose the machine that you're doing. So I'm going to use the Cameo 5 Alpha series. And then you need to pay attention to a few things. The first thing I'll change is the little drop down box. It defaults to card. So kind of on the right hand side, just below the whole long list of materials, there's a little drop down arrow that will let you choose between card or adhesive backed, fabric, foil. We're just going to do, for Kraft foam, we're going to choose other. And then we want to make sure that our tool holder 1 is the tab that we're selecting. There's 2 tools, obviously, in the Cameo 5 Alpha. We're going to do tool holder 1 because this is the 2mm blade that's labeled with a 1. And it says cut. Oh, you know what? The other thing I wanted, we could probably name it Kraft foam 2mm. You could double click your text and change that again, just so you know it's 2mm. So tool holder 1 is the tab we're using. We want it to cut. So the force is going to be, if it's a 2mm material, then you're probably going to go with all the way on 20 for 2mm. Sometimes you can get away with 19. We would do a test cut. Let's see, it should know that you've got which blade you've got in there. And for some reason, I don't know, Michael, does yours recognize that it will go up to 20? Okay. Maybe I'll show you the custom cuts. For some reason, this one's not recognizing that it's a 2mm blade. All right, so we'll do this again with a different material. Yeah, for some reason it doesn't recognize the 2mm blade. I'm going to do a real quick cut. You can just watch me. Because I have set this up. And I can actually, once I've got it set, if I go back to the regular page, I can actually change the blade depth to a 19. Okay, so what I've got in my testing at home, I've got my blade at 20, my force all the way up to 30, my speed at 4, 1 pass, and line segment overcut is on. All right, so let me grab a piece of foam. All right, one thing you can do when you're trying to decide how deep to do a material is you can hold your blade up to your material. So I know this is about 2 millimeters. I'm probably going to need to go to 20, but I'm just going to hold my blade up to that material. So I want the blade not to be extending past, except just the tiniest bit. It needs to cut all the way through. And so you're talking, you know, fractions of a millimeter that you want it to extend past your material. But that's one way you can get in the right ballpark before you do your test cut, is to hold that blade, that extended blade up. Put your blade where you think you need it. Like 18 wouldn't be enough to get all the way through. I've got mine at 20 and that looks like it's going to work. And then of course we'll do a test cut. So I've got my blade at 20. And got my material on there. When you're working with unusual materials that may not stick as well, I will use either just an empty cardboard roll from a roll of vinyl, or if you have a brayer, that kind of helps too, to get your material on, pressed nicely onto your mat. Okay, want to adjust these guides. I do have the platform on there just to hold my mat nice and flat. And I can do a test cut. Looks like I have that set for 2 passes, so that's why I did that. Okay, so that one is actually a little bit tough, but it will pop out. So if I were doing something a little more complex, I might choose to do another pass. It won't go any deeper than that, but I'll leave it at 2 passes, and it looks like I should be able to pop it out. So as you get into these deeper blades, you have to be willing to do a little bit of experimentation. Your Autoblade and your 1 millimeter manual blade, those you should be able to have the software tell you generally what you need for settings. But as you get into deeper and unusual materials, then okay, so this is Kraft foam, and it cut enough that I can kind of pop it out. And as usual, it cut it better at home. You get me live, so it's not ever going to cut as well. Okay, so there's my Kraft foam with the 2 millimeter manual blade. All right, talk about the 2 millimeter Kraft blade. Now here's where you get into kind of more experimenting. So the Kraft blade is similar to the manual 2 millimeter blade, but this is made to be able to go with the Kraft blade is for a little bit denser material. So maybe chipboard or leather. I'm going to roll these both out to their maximum at 20, and you'll see that the tip itself is a different shape. So I don't know if we can get a close-up. Okay. See if I can get a white background here. Okay, so the 1 millimeter or the 2 millimeter manual blade, again, it has the same tiny little tip as the Autoblade. But once you move into a Kraft blade, it's got a much wider angle. So that's not going to be for your delicate materials. This is made for more dense and experimental types of things. The other thing that changes when you switch to a Kraft blade is instead of just your normal cutting, you get into Smart Cut technology that will have your hooks and loops that will reorient the blade, because it's wide and fat, so it's not going to take those sharp angles really well. So it's going to reorient itself by lifting, moving to another spot on the material, doing a hook, or as it's doing a corner, it will do kind of a loop to reorient itself. And so you're moving into Smart Cut technology when you move into the Kraft blade. Now, the tool holder 1 is actually faster than tool holder 2. So besides the Smart Cut technology, you've got a completely different motor running your carriage 2. Oh, but that's not actually yet. These are both blade 1. These both go in carriage 1. So let me show you the Kraft blade. 2 millimeter Kraft blade in carriage 1. Let's see, and for this one we're going to do Kraft foam again. Get this. And yeah, so 2 millimeter Kraft foam. And so this one, I'm still going to do the blade on a 20 because it is a 2 millimeter Kraft foam. And my force, I'm going to go to 32 again. Now if you have a material that it recognizes, you can just make your changes in the software without going to a custom material. This one I'm going to do a speed of 6 and 1 pass. And since it is carriage 1, it is still going to have red cut lines. I'm also going to show you the test cut for this. It's different than your normal test cut. Your normal test cut is a square with a little triangle in the middle of it. Once you move into Smart Cut technology where it can't make those tiny little turns, it's going to do a different shape of test cut. It's going to cut a little triangle, but it's going to have loops. Okay, so that one cut better than the last time. Okay. Which camera are we doing for looking at the test cut? Okay, so the test cut did a little triangle and then loops on either side. Because it can't do those sharp little curves, it's doing your little hooks and loops. Because that's the blade needs to do that to reorient to get those final cuts that you want. Okay, so now I'll just cut a couple of flowers. So again, this is similar speed because it's in carriage 1, but it's lifting and doing extra little hooks as it is cutting, or in between cuts of the flower it's trying to cut, just to make sure that it gets the blade oriented the way it needs to be. When you're cutting really thick materials, it's hard for that blade to turn, and just the shape of the blade makes it hard to turn. So it's using this Smart Cut technology. All right, so when you cut it yourself, you'll see these extra little hooks and loops, but what we want are these final flowers. So that did cut better than the deep cut, the 2mm blade. And I probably could have increased the force on this one if I'd spent a little more time dialing in those settings. But that Kraft blade, you can see, same depth, but it used a little bit different motion, and it cut out these cute little flowers. So these are craft foam. You could kind of wrap them up and hot glue the edges and kind of layer them. So that's a fun project if you're cutting craft foam for kids to do work with. That 2mm Kraft blade is a good one. All right, so let's talk about the 3mm Kraft blade. That one goes in carriage 2. So it looks the same as your 2mm, except it goes to a depth of 3mm instead of just 2mm, so it'll go dial all the way up to 30. And this is, if you're looking at it in the shop, it'll say Type C. That means it's a newer blade, but it goes in carriage 2. This is kind of your heavy-duty cutting blade for non-standard materials up to 3mm thick. So you can cut foam if you find a foam that is thicker than the 2 millimeters. And I've also used it on leather, and you can try chipboard. It is not for cutting dense materials. So just because something's 3 millimeters or less than 3 millimeters thick does not mean that you can necessarily cut it because you have a Kraft blade. Back to an X-Acto knife or a craft knife. I'm sure most of you, if you're crafters, you're familiar with a craft knife. If you are able to cut a material with a craft blade like this, then you probably will be able to cut it with the Silhouette craft blade. If it takes multiple scores to get through it, you're kind of going to do the same thing with your 3 millimeter craft blade. So I don't know if you've cut out cardboard or giant boxes for your kids, cutting out doors and windows. If you've done that, you probably know that you can't, it's easier if you score it first and then do multiple passes with your blade to be able to get through that. So the same principle with the 3 millimeter craft blade is you're actually going to do a series of cutting that goes deeper and deeper as you go. So what I will do is when I set up my custom cut setting, I'm going to set it just to remember what the maximum thickness is that I want my blade at, but I'm going to start lower when I'm actually cutting it. So I'm going to do, I will usually do like a blade on 5, then the blade on 10, and then the blade on 14 or whatever your final cutting depth is. So just remember, this is not a magical cut through anything. It's not going to cut through metal. It's not going to cut through wood. You still have to have something that's not super dense to be able to cut it with your machine. And then you're just going to do a series of passes to get there. So let me show you a custom cut setting. Michael, do you have a 3 millimeter craft blade you can do? Okay. So let me, I'm going to insert that so I can get my readings. And I'm going to show you, we're going to cut some real leather. All right, so go back to your, the other thing you need to do is when you are cutting with your carriage 2, you need to make sure that you've told it you're cutting with carriage 2. So you're going to select your object in the send panel, and you want one of those choices that will give you blue lines that says Tool 2. So kind of at the bottom of the page, you've got your option for Tool 1, Tool 2, use all the lines or use the outline. You've got the same thing for Tool 2. So you want to select your material and choose Tool 2. And just depending on what you're doing, you could use all selected lines. Is usually what you'll use. Maybe use outline. And your lines, your cut line preview will turn blue. And if your blade is installed and you have an actual setting set up, then it will also show your hooks and loops. But let's go, and then on your cut settings, you want to, just under the machine icon, you want to click over to tool holder 2. So you're not working with tool holder 1, you're working with tool holder 2. And then you can say more or add a custom cut setting. So if I click on more and click the little plus button at the bottom of the list of materials, it'll pop up another new material. So I can say something like real leather, and I might say brown, so because I'm setting a material specifically for a setting for a specific oh, I can't talk material I'm using. So then again, I'm going to choose the Cameo 5 Alpha series as my machine. that drop down, I don't want it to say card, I want it to say other. And then I want to make sure I'm on the tab for tool holder 2. And then right in line with that, go all the way to the right, and there's a plus sign over there. If you are adding some other action, it's going to assume you're doing a craft cut, which is good, but if you were adding like a rotary cut or something like that, this is where you can choose your other actions. But we don't need that. We're going to go with this craft cut, so make sure your craft cut tab is showing. And if you look down all the way at the bottom for blade depth, you can see that it'll let you go all the way up to 30. Now you can choose to do whatever will help you remember, but I want to do mine on a blade of 14. So I'm going to set it to 14, and as you tap the little arrow, you can see that dial. It starts all the way down at the low numbers, and there'll be blue. So once you pass 10, it'll move on to that next layer up. So you can see 11, 12, 13, 14 in black. If you were to keep going, you would get into the 2 point whatever all the way up to 3 millimeters. That's going to be your red line that will get you your 21 through 30. I'm going to leave mine at 14. So it's going to be a black 14, and that's just a reminder of the maximum depth I'm going to set it. I do want to set it for a low force. So when I am using the tool carriage 2, that actually has a lot more force than carriage 1. So in carriage 1, you're going with forces that can be up in the around 30 if you're cutting like cardstock and stuff. But I generally do not go that high with my force on carriage 2. So let's see. I'm going to go with a force of 10. So I will usually stay with my craft blade. I'm going to stay with a lighter force. So a force of 10. My speed, I want it slow. So I'm going to go with a 4. Passes, I'm going to work my way up, and I have found just through the experimenting I've done, if I do 3 passes at each blade level, that does better for me than trying to cut all the way through on the first pass, or even cutting a 1 pass and then moving up my blade. If it's got a track to get through, that cuts it a lot easier. So I'm going to leave put my passes to 3. The other thing I will change is my loop blade height. Now I know this works on the rotary blade. I'm not sure it's working on the craft blade, but I'm going to put my loop blade height, we'll put it at 8. That just means it's supposed to do those hooks and loops at a so it'll kind of lift, and it's just skimming the surface enough to touch that blade and change it instead of cutting deep into it. Okay, everything else should work. So now I can click save, and then all the way up back to the top, click your X to get out of those advanced settings, and then you need to find that material that you just created. So real leather, brown, or whatever you changed it to. Okay, I am going to switch to my brand new mat. Because I really want this to hold well. And I have a piece of real leather. So something about these other materials you're trying is they also, like leather is a natural product. This is, I can't remember if it's like 2 or 3 ounces. It's not super thick. This one is not super dense. It's a little bit floppy, but not so floppy that it won't hold in place. Now when I do my leather, I actually put the smooth side down and the kind of the fuzzy side up. That gets less debris on my mat. So smooth side down, fuzzy side up. I make sure I do not have it over on the channel because it's so thick it would mess up the rollers. And I'll just stick it down really well. Load that in there. Now we told it we were going to do 14, but I'm going to start on a 5. So right now it's at 0. I'm going to dial it up. And you can tell you're going the right way because this distance will shrink and you'll be seeing more blade exposed. So I'm going to start it at 5. It's going to do 3 passes at 5. And then we'll dial it up some more. So these first few passes, it's just kind of scoring it. So it's not trying to dig in deep where it might jam. Once it's got that score in there, then the next time when we go a little bit deeper, it's going to have a path already drawn out that it's going to easily follow. And you'll notice that in carriage 2, it all goes slower. It's doing those hooks and loops. Have we had any questions or comments? Okay. All right, so I'm not going to unload the mat. I'm just going to take the blade out, and I want to make sure that I'm not adjusting this side to side. I want to be careful that the housing stays exactly in the same place. But I'm going to go from a 5 to a 10. And on leather, this is one of those where you're going to want to make sure that you're kind of watching for debris and brushing it out if you need to. And since it's doing exactly the same thing, I could send it in the software or I can just hit repeat job. And if you get used to the sound, you can hear it's cutting a little bit deeper, and you do want to kind of babysit a job when you're doing a craft cut. You want to make sure that it doesn't get stuck or hung up, because you are working with denser materials. Now if you were cutting the same thing, I have cut with the same blade out of this is a faux leather, kind of a metallic leather. So I did the same process. I started at 5, 3 passes. I worked my way up a little bit at a time. I think this one I only needed it on a 9. So that's a faux metallic leather. I also use this kind of fabric backed faux leather. Same thing, 3 passes at a 5, and then just kind of worked my way up to get through that. Okay, so then this one, it's at a 10. We want to put it up to 14 and hope that this is the final one. And repeat job. And sometimes on leather or on fabric, you want to keep a pair of scissors handy. It might miss a few spots, but if you think it's going to come up all fine, it might have just a little bit hanging on, and that's fine. It's cut most of the way through, and so you're fine to just finish off with scissors or a manual X-Acto knife or craft knife. Okay, so that was the 14. Let's see. Yeah, I don't feel like it got all the way through. So I'm just gonna go up a little bit more. I'm gonna try a 16, and I may have ended up with this end of the leather may have been a little thicker than that end of the leather. Repeat one more time. But in the end, we're going to end up with this little weird shaped thing. In case you're wondering, it's going to be, you can add a little snap or an eyelet there, and you've got a little key fob ready to, you can put a little heat transfer vinyl on there or something like that. You could even foil with your heat foil pen onto that real leather, but you would just add a little snap of some sort and turn that into a key fob. So that's actually the weird shape that we're cutting. Really fun once you can actually start working with leather. Here's another one, a little earbud holder. This is actually a tutorial on the Silhouette 101 blog. It's kind of old, but this one used the 2mm Kraft blade. A little snap. That also is real leather, similar to the one we're cutting now. So just to kind of give you an idea of what you can do with these Kraft blades. All right, okay. Again, you have to just be willing to experiment. And that one mostly cut through. Still left a little bit of a mess on my mat, but now it's so thin. There's just a couple little spots that I just finished that off with scissors. So you can see that that Kraft blade is pretty cool if you like to experiment with different materials. and then clean up all your little leather fluff. So pretty fun to experiment with all these things. The rotary blade, we have done a couple classes just using the rotary blade, so I'm not going to talk about it here. That will cut felt and crepe paper and fabric. The only adjustment you need to do with this one is when you first get it, you roll that collar up to expose the rotary blade, and then you just keep it like this forever. So rotary blade is similar, is the same as these others, and we do have other classes on just the rotary blade. So if we don't have any questions, our time is gone, but hopefully you can see how you can use these special blades that all work with the Cameo 5 Alpha to really have a broad range of things that you can cut. And I hope you experiment and show us on Instagram and Facebook, show us what you're making. Thanks for joining me today.